Hi, I'm Nick Rains from Leica Academy Australia. In this video, I'd like to discuss with you the 50mm lens range that Leica offers. There's 4 different models. There's the Noctilux, there's the Summilux, there's the Summicron, and there's the APO-Summicron. So what is it about 50mm lenses that makes them so special? Well, 50mm is about the diagonal of a full-frame sensor, roughly. And what that means is that the lens gives you a 1 times magnification. So everything in the photograph looks about as far away in the photograph as it did in real life. So it's not bringing anything to the perspective. And Henri Cartier-Bresson, one of the most famous photographers of all time, had his strong opinions on the subject, and he liked the idea of no effect from the lens. He found wide-angle lenses exaggerate the perspective, close things look bigger than they should, and telephoto lenses bring distant objects more close, so they change the perspective. He wanted it to look realistic, just as you saw it in real life, and a 1 times magnification gives you that identical perspective to your normal eye's viewing perspective. It's not about angle of view, it's about the relationship between objects at different distances, the way they overlap, the way they interact. So there is a lens which gives you this, it brings nothing to the shot except for the timing and the framing. There is no change of perspective. So that's why people like Henri Cartier-Bresson used to enjoy that lens so much. It's not the only lens he used to use, but it was the one that gave him the most satisfaction, and a lot of his most famous photographs were taken on that lens. Let me show you an image from each of these lenses, and I'll try and explain the difference between them. I'm going to start with the modestly priced Summicron f2 50mm lens. And this shot that you'll see here is a simple shot taken on a trip to Cambodia. There was a group of monks just standing there waiting for their lift home, I think, near Angkor Wat. And the light was beautiful. There's that lovely creamy sort of hazy light late in the afternoon, and the way they were positioned I thought was just really appealing. A very casual classic 50mm lens shot. Now the Summicron f2 standard 50mm lens, it's a really good starting point for anybody who's getting into the M system. And also, if you have SL system, you can put these lenses on those cameras too with the adapter. It gives you very similar results. It's a great place to start because it doesn't bring any effect to the shot. The perspective is as you would see it in real life. The Summicron is beautifully sharp and it's only very small, so it's a really great starting point for anybody who's building a Leica lens system. The second lens in the range, or the second lens in this sequence, I'm just going up in the scale, is the Summilux lens, the 50mm Summilux. And I'll use this image as an example because it shows the 3-dimensionality of limited depth of field, particularly with the Leica Summilux lenses. The Leica lens design seems to exaggerate the depth of field fall off by changing the way that the lens falls off in contrast as well, not just sharpness but contrast. And if you look at some videos that we have currently on our YouTube channel by Peter Carber, he does explain in detail the M lens design ethic and thought process. And this is a very big part of Leica's lens design, is this idea that you don't need necessarily to use a wide aperture to get a very interesting fall off of focus. Even at f2 it looks really good, but obviously at f1.4 depth of field is less, the fall off is exaggerated and the background looks beautifully smooth, and that with that milky creamy bokeh that Leica is so known for. That's the Summilux. Then we have the APO-Summicron 50mm lens, and this lens was originally designed to be the perfect lens. The lens corrections and the apochromatic design make it almost the most effectively corrected lens that money can buy. And where you will see the difference is in my opinion, and it's hard to pin down. I mean, we're talking going from really, really, really good to really, 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 really good. It's there, but it's there. And if you look in the micro detail, you'll see a crispness which is very, very hard to see in any of the lenses. It's got a really, really high acutance. And in this image by one of our Leica Academy guests taken on the monochrome, the detail is so crisp, but it's almost brutally sharp on her skin. But every hair is perfectly drawn. And the combination of the APO-Summicron and the monochrome is an astonishing combination, and you will be amazed if you see the prints of this sort of image. In fact, I think there's a print of this image in our Leica stores in Australia. I made it myself so that we could show customers what it looked like, and it is quite remarkable. It's very, very difficult to show the characteristics of this lens on the internet. And then lastly, we have the famous Noctilux, and in this image, this is Stu Robertson, an artist in New Zealand. I was working on a workshop in New Zealand with him as a co-presenter, and we were demonstrating portraiture using the Noctilux in an old wool shed, and Stu got to be my portrait victim. This is the classic Noctilux shot. Portrait, fairly close face, distant background, vastly out of focus. And with a lens like this, you need to almost pick your backgrounds first, because the way the lens throws things out of focus is very important to the composition of the shot. So in many cases, I'll actually look around to see what looks good out of focus and then position my subject accordingly. And that's what I did with this shot. I wanted the windows of the shearing shed to be sort of bright, blurred objects, but clearly still windows, but not identifiable, and therefore less distracting. The focus is clearly on his face, but the atmosphere is captured by the lens beautifully. So this is an exotic lens. It's something that's very easy to get addicted to. And if you ever buy one of these lenses or have an opportunity to use one, you'll probably only ever use it at f/0.95, and you may find that all of your shots are taken that way. So be careful, it's an addictive lens. Anyway, that is the range of 50mm lenses. There's something for everybody here. The range of prices is quite wide. You've got a starting lens with the Summicron, and then you've got the two super exotic ones here if your budget stretches to them. But between them, they give you this beautiful classic 50mm perspective with no inflection of perspective. And if there was one lens that I would choose, if I could not choose any other lenses, I had to pick one lens to go out shooting, 50mm lens would be the one I would prefer, because I think I can do pretty much anything with it. Now let's leave you with one thought. This photograph here was taken on a 50mm lens, but it looks like a super wide lens. That's because 50mm lenses are also really good for shooting panoramas because they don't change the perspective. And that means that the stitching software has very little work to do, and you get a perfect stitch every time. And the better the lens, the less the fall off into the corners. And again, the easier it is for the stitching software to do the work. You also get this very interesting standard perspective, 50mm perspective, but the angle of view of a much wide angle lens. And the combination of the two is very effective. So this is why I say I could shoot anything with a 50mm lens. If I needed to do a wide angle lens shot, I would simply do it with more than one image in a panoramic stitch. So very, very versatile indeed.